Happy Saturday, everybody. We're excited to be here with Gary from Constricted and Addicted and his amazing wife. We have a bunch of people joining us in the chat, and exciting news, we hit 300 subscribers today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Help get us there. That's so awesome. I put a post out on Instagram, and within like 20 minutes, we had 6 more people to get us over the hump. So we're at 301. So thank you.
Very cool.
Things are the big things. We are wearing our Red Onion reptile gear, and Bear's in the chat. Got to wear our Red Onion reptile gear. Did some pretty awesome stuff. He's a pretty awesome guy. So, Saturday, we were talking about how it's hot here. Gary lives in California. It's also hot there, but we're at equal temperatures. So you're not burning up down there anymore as warm.
Well, yeah, not so much, but it's still unseasonably warm for June. You know, it is what it is. We just kind of deal with it. You know, being where we live in California, we're coming into that season, but we've been dealing with over 100 degrees for the last couple of days, so it's just been unreasonably warm. And then you just got, you know, for me, I got to remember the reptiles. You know, we got to run the air conditioner because I certainly don't want my reptiles overheating. I can take the heat in the house better than they can, but they're retics. So retics, they appreciate a lower temperature than your typical reptiles that are at 85, 90 degrees, you know. So we keep the house just under 80 degrees when it starts to get this hot outside.
See, I don't know anything about reticulated pythons, so I'd already learned something new. I didn't realize that they like to be kept at cooler temperatures. No idea. Angel probably knew that, though. Angel's a wealth of knowledge. Not a wealth of knowledge. Not about things besides ball pythons, rats, mice, and African soft-furred rats. That's all I've got. It's my wheelhouse.
Well, I totally appreciate you guys and what you do. I vaguely remember when you guys had jumped into the reptile community. You jumped in feet first, you know, and you've made a splash. And the splash you've made has been very positive, you know. So my hats are off to you. It's, you know, I tend to hang out with the retic keepers, the larger constrictor keepers, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a family. It's reptile keepers in general. I mean, we all have to stick together. I mean, it's not about, you know, the ball python keepers or the monitor keepers or everybody. You know, we're all at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
It's true. And Gary, you are really like, that's one of the things that drove us to you. I remember when you reached out to us when we first started and we got to know you, and you have such a positive light about you and the way that you bring people together and the videos that you make. You allowed us to be part of your US ARC video, and you had so many different keepers and species in those videos. It was a testament to the community that you've built, because you had quite the crew there in your video and in your videos in the past too.
It's the people, you know, that all I really do is just put the word out, you know, and I get a lot of people that respond to my posts and they want to be a part of. And that to me is just like, that's where it really, you know, that's where it really comes together. You know, when we talk about, you know, doing stuff for USARK in particular, I mean, very clearly, I'm just a member of USARK, you know, but I'm a very enthusiastic member of USARK. I love doing things. A lot of this stuff, I don't even really talk to Vanessa or Phil about until after the fact, you know. I get this idea in my head, right? And then I just kind of run with it. And then I'll text Phil or I'll text Vanessa and say, hey, by the way, I'm doing this. Are you guys okay with this? And they're like, yeah, go with it. And it's gotten to the point now where Vanessa will contact me and she'll say, hey, why don't we do this? Why, you know? So that's what really spawned off this last thing that I'm doing with USARK. Is called 30 Seconds with USARK. I'll be doing that up in Puyallup. And what I plan on doing is just talking to USARK members and finding out in 30 seconds why it's important. And it comes from all ends of the spectrum. I mean, I've got video from ZoomEd. I mean, just all sorts of different spectrums of the reptile keeping industry, because it's not one area or specific or you know, it's not one thing that does this. It's everybody together, you know. We all have our favorites that we deal with, but at the end of the day, we're a community. It's interesting, as I like to say this, right? Like, we're on this little island, you know what I mean? And we have a big fight. And the big fight is that a lot of people don't trust reptiles. So they don't want us to own reptiles. They don't want nothing to do with reptiles. That's why we have to. That's why, in my mind, I believe it's important to support USR. You know, if you don't support USR, that's but at the end of the day, we have to support each other. You know, because realistically, there's more people that want to take our reptiles away than people that want to let us keep them. You know, and I love my reptiles. Right? In California, we don't have too many laws about keeping reptiles. You know, so it's really about us and being responsible about our reptile keeping. But, I've got a 13-foot reticulated python up here, and I would be devastated. I mean, just absolutely devastated if there was a rule that came about that said I couldn't keep her or anything like her. I mean, it'd be like taking away a kid. It really would. So that's why it's important, And when I reach out to people and I get people that I don't know that say, hey, we want to be part of this video. We want to be part of this video. It warms me up because that's the community coming together. That's not me coming together. That's just the reptile community in general coming together.
Yeah, that's it. It's really important. It's absolutely really important. And to be honest, how long have you been in the hobby for? Or how long have you been working with reptiles?
So I got my first reptile when I was a kid, and I want to say I was pre-teenager, right? My sister had like a 14-foot reticulated python. She never interacted with it. It was back in the early 80s, probably, and it was kept in a very, very large glass aquarium. Things that we don't do today that were done back in the 80s. And like I said, not interacted with. It was just kept in an enclosure. And every time you walked by that enclosure, it struck at you. It not only scared the bejeebies out of me every time I went over to her house, but it intrigued me every time I went over to her house. So go figure, my very first snake reptile was a reticulated python. And I was young. Back in the 80s, I don't remember what happened to it. I've got a much darker story that took place in my life until I turned 28 and cleaned my life up. But it really wasn't until I got probably in the last 5 years where I learned about USARK. The internet became more prominent about reptile keeping, husbandry, community, things like that. The internet became more accessible, and I think I can tell you that I've been keeping reptiles for well over 40 plus years, right? Responsibly, I can tell you that probably for the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, responsibly, I've been keeping reptiles. And in the last, probably 4 years, I've been working with retics.
The reason that I ask is, one, I want to know how long. It's always good to know how long. It's because I'm originally from New York, and in New York, we used to be able to have tons and tons of things, and I started out, got a bunch of stuff. And then back in, I think, late 90s, early 2000s, they passed a law, no constrictors, no monitors, they just stripped, New York. So what you're saying about them passing a law or something and taking away, your ability to keep reticulated pythons, I dealt with that there. That's why I left, because I can't do this there. And it's almost like there's like nothing you could do over there. Like, they are just like, boom, you're done. And it's been like that for over 20 years. There's been no change. So for me, I left because I want to work with these animals. I want to keep these animals. I left. So hopefully California never changes, and you guys can do and keep, because it, just like you say, it's amazing. And we didn't really have, I think we did, but didn't sort of have USARK at that time. If anything, it might have been really new. I know there was something called PJAC at the time, but that really didn't really help out with, what we were dealing with. But now we have USARK, so if something like this were to come up, we see them. they shoot right out. They take care of, they we get the emails, I get all the emails, all the things to sign and so on. And it's so different now. We to have someone who is basically a mouthpiece, a spokesperson for us, representing us, because we can't do what they do. We can't, but we can support them and we can spread the word, and that's what you're doing, and that's what we all need to do. So I really respect that, and I appreciate it. Everybody has to, again, like you said, if you can't join, but at least talk, write the letters. You can the what is it, the newsletter is free. You get it free. It's free.
That's right. And I've always told people, you know what? If you cannot afford a USARC membership, I'll buy you. I will buy you a $40 a year membership with the condition that you save that $40 to renew it for the following year. And I've done that. I mean, it's just basically to let it out there that there's so many different ways that we can help out. And, going on to another subject is like education, right? I mean, this one kind of fell in my lap, but I get to set up booths at our county fairs for the children. And in doing that, there's other entities that attend those fairs, and they've called us up and said, hey, can you guys bring a couple of reptiles to the school? Can you bring a couple of reptiles to our Girl Scout event? So we do this, and what happens is we really get to engage with other people and show them big snakes, small snakes, bearded dragons, doesn't matter, tortoises, that they are very, very tame, very, very handleable animals that we don't have to be afraid of. The misconception and the misinformation that gets passed around by people that don't know anything about reptiles in that moment gets crushed when we go into a fair, or we go into a Girl Scout event, or we go into a school and bring a couple of reptiles, and you see the teacher in the corner, right, that's never held a reptile in her life, and she's shaking, but she's got a snake in her hand, and she's just in awe, right, because that's the first time she's ever held a reptile. And just real quick story, I'm a talker, you guys, you have to cut me off, right? So
this is great. Just
we did a reptile show for the Girl Scouts out here, and this was what happened. We did the county fair. The county fair had the Girl Scouts come out. The Girl Scouts contacted me and said, hey, my daughter absolutely loved your snakes. Can you guys come and do the Girl Scout event for us? And it was in the middle of January. It was cold. I'm like, they said, we'll have heat there. It'll be great. So we decided to do it, and they had everything for us. We brought some tortoises. I brought Emma, my 13-foot retic. I brought a couple of smaller retics, a bearded dragon, and a Burmese python, right? So I don't even know where all my snakes were. We had kids that were they just took off. They take my snakes, they just start walking all over the place, right? And so the girl's mother came up to me at the end of the event, right? And her daughters had one of my retics the whole time, just sitting at a table with one of my retics. I'm checking up on her, of course, but and she's just totally into this. And her mom came up to me and she says, she goes, I want to share a story with you. I said, okay. She says, when I was in kindergarten, my teacher had a ball python for a pet in the classroom. And that teacher made us all sit in a circle and told us we had to sit there while that snake crawled on us, and it scared me to death, right? And she says, that's where my fear of snakes came. And as she's telling me the story, right, I've got my Burmese python with me, and she says that she's watching her daughter interact with that animal, and her fear of snakes is slowly going away. And as she's talking to me and telling me the story, she reaches over and she touches my Burmese python, And I'm watching this all take place. I'm listening to but I'm more in like, oh my God, she's reaching and she's touching the Burmese python while she's telling me this story, right? And then she held it. She asked me if she could hold my Burmese python. And what I got in that moment was this transformation of somebody who was deathly afraid of reptiles, who walked through this fear and got to hold a reptile, totally changed their perception of reptiles in general. you know, and it's got nothing to do with me, right? All I was in the right place at the right time. That's all that amounts to. And the fact that, you know, I don't misrepresent our animals. And, you know, I do, like Nikki said, I really do the best I can to put everything in a positive light when it comes to myself, my reptiles, my family, whatever it is. I don't want any sort of negativity. And when we go out and do these shows, we do our very best to bring that positive energy with us, and it reflects, right? So those are some of the great things that I get to experience when we do this. And you know what? It's such a small thing in retrospect. But if we're all doing something small like that in our communities with our reptiles, think of the impact we're making as a whole. You know what I mean? So that's why it's like, I don't know how I actually fell into being able to go to the county fairs. I don't remember how that happened. I think maybe the Serpentarium out here used to do it, and somebody in the community knew that I had reptiles, and one phone call led to another, and then next thing you know, they invited me, and they've been doing it for the last 3 years. So that's how it happened for me. But we can all get involved somehow, some way, by contacting your county and asking about fairs and asking about events and asking them, is it possible to set up a reptile? It's amazing. People want to see it, but they're afraid of it. And they're not going to go looking for it. But if we present ourselves positively to the community in an educational stance, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to look at us and go, let's see what we can do for you. And once the community sees how wonderful, I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not going to bring a reptile to an event that I am unsure of. You know what I mean? So obviously responsible reptile keepers are going to hopefully bring responsible reptiles with them to a show. But in that light, we're going to give off this positive energy and this positive, influence regarding reptiles. And if it's changing the minds of 2 people at a time, we're doing a good job. So I'm just grateful that I get that opportunity. I really am.
And you're passionate about it. You can just hear it in your voice when you talk about it. And that's exciting. I think passion about it is exciting. I was thinking about yesterday, we went to my niece's graduation, and my sister's longtime best friend was there. She's been friends with her since 4th grade, and she's in her early 40s now, mid 40s. And she said, I've been following I've heard that you breed snakes. I'm deathly afraid of snakes. It's one of my biggest fears. And usually that's where I would stop and just tell them a little bit and then kind of leave it. And I thought, no, I'm going to ask her if she wants to come over someday. And I was like, you know what? You could come over someday and you could just meet them, or you could just hang out and look at them. And she goes, you know what? I really need to do that because I really want to get over my fear of them. And I think that would probably be a good way to do it. So you're right. It's just getting out there and in the right place at the right time, having the right conversations.
And the right animals.
And the right animals.
And the right animals. Yeah, that's a big help too.
That's why shows are good too, because a lot of people go to reptile shows. They're not even there to buy an animal. Some people go to a show, they don't even know what it's about. You know, like out here at the shows that we do out here, you know, we get a lot of people that come in and they're like, I didn't know you could buy animals here. I didn't know that you could, hold animals. People don't know this. And so somehow they end up coming to these reptile shows, and then they get this whole experience, and you'll end up talking to someone who's like, oh, I was afraid, or I was this. And, I walked around and, I learned some stuff. That alone, if that's all they take, they didn't touch an animal the entire time, if they didn't buy it, it's fine. But if they picked something up and it kind of sparks a new interest in a way, changes some of the stigma sometimes.
Yeah, we get a lot of people too at our shows that are there because their kids wanted to go, and the parents will often say, I am terrified of them, but my son or my daughter, they wanted to be here today, so I'm here to try and get over my fear so that maybe someday this can be a thing.
That's awesome. I love going to reptile shows just to network. And it's could be, my wife usually goes with me, and she's like me. She supports everything I do with reptiles, and actually she has her own reptiles. She has a tegu. She has 2 bearded dragons. She has a gecko, a Euromastix, 2 sulcata tortoises, a redfoot tortoise, a Russian tortoise. So she's got a plethora of reptiles, but I'm the networker. I'm the guy that, like, I do social media. She doesn't even know what really social media is. So she gets on her Facebook every once in a while and she connects with people, but she's not like me when it comes to social media. Me, on the other hand, like, when I buy a reptile from somebody, I stay in contact with them. And that's one of the reasons that I've been going to NARBC in Texas for the last couple of years is my buddy Chris McVicker, who I bought my very first super dwarf from. He became more than just the guy I bought a retail from. He became a friend, to the point where if I was to ever up and move out of California, I think I would go to Oklahoma City and be closer to Chris and his wife. And they're just great people, and there's great people in that community there. You know, that is if we ever left California. I don't know if that will ever happen in my lifetime, but it's really about connecting and making friendships, and I've done that with D&T Retics, Jackson Taylor. They sold me a couple of retics, and I've been very good friends with them. They've been helpful. Jennifer from Mod Exotic, she's another one that I have not purchased an animal from her, but when I've got questions, I message her, and she's always been super, super helpful for me whenever I've got questions. She took a couple of my animals off my hands a while back. So there's just these connections that you get to meet when you go to shows that sometimes we only have on social media, and like coming to your guys' show in Puyallup in July, right? So I get to meet all you guys face to face. I mean, this is one form of a connection, but I think something really goes further when we get to meet each other face to face, and maybe even make that happen at no show, in the coming future. You know what I mean? And at least that's just for me. I love going to different shows. I mean, there's one of these times I want to make it out to Retic Fest. I want to make it out to Tinley. There's just a lot of shows that I want to do. And then there's just little shows that I want to go to just to meet some of the people that I'm friends with on Instagram, and get to meet them face to face and do some more networking. I'm big on being a social butterfly like that.
Well, I'm looking forward to, or we're looking forward to meeting you in Puyallup, that's for sure. And one of the connections you sparked that never would have happened was meeting Katie, the retic mama who knows you, who I would never have met at a show. She would have just probably walked by and that would have been it. But then we got to connect with her, and excited to see her again in July when she comes to meet up with you. It's going to be great.
Now, that's all, because she's another one that I've never met before. But we have animals from the same clutch. I think we have 2 retics from the same breeder that are from the same clutch. She's got boys, I got girls. So, I mean, so this is, so here again, once again, we've got this network of the breeder and the buyer, right? But then that kind of spawns out when you meet people on social media that, hey, I've got the same animal, and we find out they've got the same hatch date, and next thing you know, and then that spawns off, more, friendships and networking, and I just love it. Again, for me, it's about the positivity. I surround myself with people who are positive in this industry. I do not get caught up in drama. I don't want to get caught up in drama. I don't post about drama. I don't care about drama. All I care about is my animals and your animals and how we can all get along together. That is it, man. That's all I care about.
And that's what everybody should care about, really. I mean, we should, sometimes the drama gets a little funky, but yeah, I'm the same way. These guys are the same way, just kind of stay away from a lot of negativity. And you could see stuff here, and oftentimes negativity, negative people don't really last in this industry very long. So, a lot of us are really here to help each other. Back in the day, it was very different. Now people seem to be very positive, or at least trying to be. And Mikey, I have a question though. Are you keeping or are you breeding?
For me?
Yes.
No, I'm just a keeper.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for people that do the breeding. Hats off to all of you guys that do that. I appreciate you. I wouldn't have an animal in my collection if it wasn't for the breeders, man. And there's a lot of people that, whether it's their livelihood or not, whether it's their passion or not, whether it's they're just artists, right? And I talk to people that they want to paint the colors. This goes right back to USARK. If we don't have the numbers to support, the reptile community, half of my collection has come from out of state. I mean, 90% of my reptiles did not come from California. So I look at this, right? I look at how would I have been able to do that if, like, the Lacey Act had been passed? If Phil hadn't found all the legalities and all the wordings in the bills. I don't know. I know nothing about politics, right? I'm the last person to talk to you about politics or religion for that matter. But at any rate, right? Like, if he didn't bring it to our attention and we put up a fight about it, how would I be able to get a retip from Oklahoma City or from Dallas, Texas? I mean, it's just, well, not Dallas, Texas, from Corpus Christi or wherever Dax and Taylor are. Regardless, how would myself or anybody else be able to have these beautiful animals that we might find on Morph Market, or wherever we get them from, and get them into our home if it wasn't for USARK defending our rights and making that possible? I've always been very, very pro USARK and pro, for the breeders, because, like I said, I know I wouldn't have nothing if people weren't breeding animals. So, and the other thing is that knowing when enough is enough, right? Because as a retic keeper, I have like 13 retics. And as we get older in age, I've been talking about this a little more. So, I'm getting to a point in my age where I'm looking at my collection and thinking to myself, what do I really want to have? Where do I want to be in 5 years from now? Where do I want to be in 10 years from now? See, I don't know what your age looks like in 10 years, but mine puts me at 64. You know what I mean? And when you've got 17-foot animals at 64 years old, that might not be such an attractive sight. I know that I can look at it right now and I can tell myself all the good stuff in the world about how I can do this, I got this, you know what I mean? But the reality is that we get older, right? And our bodies aren't the same as they are at 44 as they were at 34, or at 54 as they were at 44. And now I'm looking at 64, right? So it's really about me taking a look and going, where do I want to be? I mean, is 13 reticulated pythons a sensible number to have when you're at my age? So, I mean, these are some of the things that I'm looking at right now as in the future for where I want to be. I mean, as I get older, we're all going to get older. It's on the menu. You know what I mean? Unless somebody's got this magical time bottle that takes us back in time, feed me some of it because I need it. You know what I mean? But some of the stuff I'm looking at right now.
Understood.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes total sense.
I mean, the other thing is that these animals are commitments. They're not like animals that, 2-3 year commitments. If you take care of a reptile correctly, you can get 30 years. If it's a tortoise, you can get 90 years or more. We had a tortoise that was 57 years old, I think, that passed away a couple of years ago. I mean, that's a commitment. These animals live a long time. So I'm not one of these guys that's just a fly-by-nighter that's going to be out of the hobby in 2 years, or I know in my heart of hearts, sitting here right now, that I would come back in 10 years and still have the same passion for these animals that I have right now. I know this, but it's really looking at the amount of animals I have, and making sure that I'm not overdoing myself, and it doesn't look good on the hobby. You know what I mean? When you have somebody like myself, or anybody for that matter, that's got more reptiles than they know how to take care of.
So you being a keeper, so this goes back kind of to Nikki and Kurt when you guys were on Morph Forge. I watched that video, And I had talked to them about this the other day, how, you know, you guys were talking about someone bought a ball python at a show. I think it might have been for Powerhouse, and it was just a pet, and they spent like $600-700, and it was just a pet. And then you guys were kind of talking about like, wow, that's a lot for just a pet. Wow, that's a lot for someone to buy it for just a pet. And as I was talking to, again, I don't remember if this was part of the live or afterward, because we talked for a very, very long time. But we were talking about it, and I had said, I watched that, and I stopped for a second. I thought about it, and I was like, why not? Why wouldn't someone spend $600-700 just for a pet ball python? They're not a breeder. They don't care. They just see this animal. They got to have it. I sold an animal last year, the special pied. It was about $600-700, and that was just for a pet, for a kid. And I stopped, and I was talking to them, and I said, well, people do it every day with dogs. They'll spend $2,000-3,000 for a dog. It's just a pet, you know? Yep. So to me, we have to kind of take ourselves out of this weird breeder mentality and start kind of thinking like keepers too, because keepers, and you being a keeper, I'm pretty sure when you see something you like, sometimes the price tag isn't going to bother you so much because you really want to have it. It's just something you want to have. It's something you want to keep. It's something you want to look at every day and care for. And I think that's something that that as breeders, we have to also kind of reflect that onto to the general public and keepers as well, and say, like, you know what? Because for me personally, I was a keeper. I did that. I went to shows just to get stuff because I started out back in the 90s when everybody was just a keeper. You know, I got some of these, I got one of those, I got some of the, you know, we were just keeping stuff. And to hear a today keeper say that, like, because a lot of people that get in the industry, you know, immediately, or the hobby, they immediately like, oh, I'm going to breed. And I don't try to, like, I'm not going to talk you out of it, but, you know, you could also just be a keeper and just have some cool stuff. And you don't have to oh, I have 10 snakes, that means I should breed. It doesn't. You can just have 10 snakes and they're cool and they're your snakes and they're awesome. Yeah. And you could share them with your friends and your family and so on. And that conversation that you guys had really brought me back. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Why not? Why can't I sell a $2,000 snake that's just a pet? Again, we buy dogs and cats and all birds and all this, you know, all these different animals for hundreds and thousands of dollars that are just pets. So, and respectively, a ball python lives longer than a dog, you know, and it's something that's a lot, you know, it's lower maintenance and so on. So I think if someone is buying animals at a certain price range, up, down, it doesn't matter. You know, keepers are a big part of this hobby in this community, and they are part of USARK, as we could see. And, you know, there shouldn't be that much of a separation between keepers, breeders, hobbyists, industry. However, you know, because like you said, we are all in this together.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. And my very first, before I go into the story, I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. I've been seeing a lot of people say hi, and I go like this, right? And I'm trying to say hi to everybody that's here. I know that I've seen some friends of mine popped in and said hi, and I just want everybody to know that I have seen the highs, and thank you guys for being here. But my very first, so about 6 years ago, my granddaughter came up to me, and she was about 7 years old, and she said, "Grandpa, I want to learn about the big snakes that my mom grew up with." So we got into ball pythons, you know, so we went from one ball python and we had probably 20 ball pythons within, I don't know, less than 6 months, you know, and that was just a starter kit for me, because what that did was got me into the boa constrictors. I had actually got my granddaughter a boa constrictor because I wanted her to see what a larger snake was like, larger than a ball python. Maybe the real reason was I wanted a boa constrictor, and I used her as the excuse. But that was my story at the time. I'm going to stick to it. So, and then, you know, I sold off all the ball pythons. Sorry, you guys, I love reptiles, but I had so many finicky ball pythons that I couldn't get them to eat for the life of me. They would stress me out. I mean, I like to watch my animals be healthy, right? And when you've got a ball python, because you touched it on the snout, it's not the right temp, it's not the right angle, it's got water dripping off it, whatever the case is, and it says, nope, I'm not eating. That, like, I don't sleep well with that, because I'm thinking my snake's gonna die. because it's not eating. I had one that went on like a 9-month hunger strike, and that was the last one that I had. I can't do this anymore. So I took that ball python over to a friend of mine that does nothing but ball pythons, and she got it to eat. It's over there. But I went back into the boa constrictors, and I kept locality boa constrictors for a long time. My story about this is the money that we spend because they're pets, right? I've never, ever, ever intended on breeding. It's never been something that I even entertained. But I've always been like, well, that's a really neat looking animal. Well, how much is it? What? And then I'm able to come up with the money, and I get it, right? Well, once I decided, I was going to go in and get a super dwarf retic. I was really against the idea of buying a mainland retic because of my sister. I was so afraid that if I was to get this large animal, that I would be that guy that eventually wouldn't be taking care of it anymore. So I started doing research on the super dwarf retics, and I was really intrigued that 12 foot long. When you own boa constrictors, and I've had an 8-foot boa constrictor before, 12 foot doesn't seem that large, right? It still sounds manageable to me. So I reached out and I contacted my buddy Chris McVicker. My first super dwarf retic, and I can say this out loud now because my wife knows, I paid $4,000 for her. And what I paid for was the hets, and I didn't know that. The other thing is that Chris took him like, I think 7 years to create that animal that I purchased. So there was a lot of time, a lot of labor, a lot of love, a lot of dedication that went into the production of what Cora, my super dwarf, she's a 50% Kalatoa, Phantom, Platinum. And when I got her, she hated my guts. I have one of my YouTube videos. I unboxed her and she flew out of my hands. She was also a lot bigger than I thought she was, what she looked like in pictures. She was probably 4 feet long or so when I got her, and I thought she was going to be like 2 feet long. She flew out of that box, and all I could think about was just making sure that she didn't get out of my hands, and I held onto her, and she was just writhing and going everywhere, and I was just trying to keep up with her and going through my hands and going and going and going and going, and she finally calmed down, and she finally wrapped on me. Now I've got this thing, I'm going, how am I going to get her into a bin? Because she's not happy. So I finally got her into the bin, and she calmed down, but now how do I get her out? So the point being is that here's this, I never ever in my wildest dreams thought I would drop that much money on an animal that hated my guts when it got here. But I'm going to tell you what, the reward that came from the work that I put into that animal was well worth every penny that I spent on her, because today she's my best friend. Today she lays on the enclosure head first, like, hey Dad, come get me out, right? And it was more like when I first started working with her, I had people making bets. You're gonna sell that animal. You are not gonna keep it. You're gonna get bit and you're gonna give up, right? And I didn't want to do that. So every day I put on this big, heavy Carhartt jacket, big gloves, and I got her out, and she was pissing on me. She was flighty. She struck at air. She struck at my wife. She bit me. But every day for 15 minutes, I was holding this animal, letting her go through my hands, and every time I put her back on a positive note. She didn't try to bite me. We weren't like fighting, put her back, and then it was all good. And I did that for like 3 weeks. And I think after the second week, I finally took the gloves off. So now I'm working with this animal barehanded, and I realized, okay, she's just, being curious. I don't want her anywhere near my face. She's just being curious. I took the jacket off. Now, and like I said, after that, the rest is history. We became great friends. She's one of my favorite retics. But the reality is that I paid for somebody's creation. I paid for what her genetics are. And I've got everything from these multi-gene morph reticulated pythons to normal reticulated pythons. And each one of them is beautiful in their own way, meaning that, you really don't have to go and spend $4,000 on an animal. But you know what? If that's what you want to do and it makes you happy, and it makes you happy as an owner, and it's one of those animals that you're going to look at, and like, I love my animals. I absolutely love them. I don't know how else to convey that, but people know. People just know, and it doesn't matter how much money I spend on that animal. They're family. They become part of us. And I've got an animal right now that's becoming a challenge that I've had since she was 6 months old. She's almost 2. And she's got these very herky-jerky movements. So you know what I'm doing? I'm going back to basics. Started with a jacket and gloves, handling her 15 minutes every day. So the first day I had jacket and gloves on, second day I didn't. I just free-handed her. And that's where we're at right now. We're on day 3. And she's just very stiff. She's very herky-jerky. She's coming straight at my face, and it's just very, very different from any other retic that I have. And what I want to make sure of is that I'm giving her the same attention that I'm giving all of my other retics, because that's one of the problems. And that's why I talk about reducing my collection a little bit, because I see that some of my animals don't get handled like some of my other animals do. And I don't want that. I want them all to be handled equally, right? So anyways, Adler from Aiton Foundation had texted me after I posted my first video, and he made a very, 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 very logical comment that I didn't take into effect, that she's 2 years old. Maybe she's coming of age. Maybe she's maturing. And I've very fortunately, I've got 2 male reticulated pythons too. And I have not had to deal with any sort of weird breeding behaviors with any of my animals. And with 13 reticulated pythons, maybe I'm going to have that one. And I don't give up. That's one of the things. If I get bit, if anything happens, if I see anything strange, if I get scared, I don't leave them alone. I don't say, oh, well, here, I ain't messing with you anymore. I end up giving that animal more attention because something has happened in that relationship, and I want to repair it. So I go off on tangents, you guys. You guys are going to have to go hey.
No.
Oh no, this is
we're listening.
great. And it makes me think back to even some of the ball pythons we've gotten. Like we've had a bamboo that we got, who's het puzzle, and man, I spent 2.5 to 3 weeks every night for 2 hours holding her. And she's, after about a week, she stopped striking at me through, I just put a hand towel over her because she was so small. But she's finally, after 2 weeks, stopped striking at me through the hand towel. And that was when I was able to actually move on to just holding her normally. And then she, anytime anybody walked by or shadow, she'd strike at it. But you have to put that work in. You can't be afraid of these animals that you're owning and keeping and have to interact with on a daily basis. And it's the direct reflection of the time you put in to the things that you enjoy.
There's that difference too between breeder and keeper too, because as a breeder, most breeders don't feel that same way, where they're like, well, these animals have to be handleable, whereas a keeper is like, every animal I have, I need to handle because these are my pets. These are my, I take care of them. So there tends to be a difference in how, not so much about care, but definitely about handling and time of handling and amount of handling. Because I can tell you right now, I have a ton, but I have my special favorite ones that I take out all the time because they're really cool and I like them. But does it mean that I don't handle the other ones? Of course, I still handle the other ones. But as a breeder, you tend to have more, so you don't handle as much. Whereas keepers, you do spend more time because they are, those are your pets. You spend time with them. You want to handle them more. It's not about taking weights and doing numbers and doing ultrasounds and so on and so forth. It's very different.
That's a good point, right? Because especially when it comes from keeper to breeder, and as breeders, I'm sure you guys get this question all the time: how tame is it? Right? If somebody's buying a reptile or a ball python python, or and they want to know how tame it is before it gets to their house. Are they going to have work to do? Is it going to be like plug and play? Is it going to come out of the bag and, oh, we've got this wonderful little pet now? The reality is that I say this because I've experienced this, right? Like, I went to a show in Texas, and I had got a reticulated python in Texas. I had it shipped to my house. And when it got to my house, it was a lot different in demeanor than when it left Texas. And things happen, animals get jostled in flight. They're in new environments. They're scared. You're big. They're small. There's all these different entities and like challenges that they are now facing. But yet we got this message from the breeder that says, oh yeah, it doesn't strike. I've been working with it. It's a great animal. And then all of a sudden we've got this animal that's not so great anymore. And that's where we have to, first of all, I like what Kurt was talking about. I think it's a lot of confidence, right? We can't be afraid of the animal and then have to have this challenge in front of us of taming the animal if that's what needs to happen. We have to do it with confidence. And don't get me wrong, because every time I go get Celia out right now, I've got fear behind me. I'm afraid she's going to get bit. I'm afraid she's going to get stressed out. There's a lot of things I'm afraid of. But at the same time, I walk through that with confidence and say, you know what? It's going to happen. We're going to get through this. I have not been bit yet. Yeah, I've been peed on a couple times, but nothing bad has happened. And the more that I do that, the more confidence that I get. And I think that's important to have as a keeper, or maybe even as a breeder, but I think more so as a keeper, because we're getting an animal from you, right? We are bringing a new animal into our house. And a lot of people are just expecting that they're going to get this animal out of the bag or Dixie cup or whatever it is, and it's not going to be scared. It's going to be perfect. But then it bites them and they're like, oh my God, I don't want to mess with this anymore. And it goes into a drawer for the rest of their life, or it goes into a PVC enclosure and never gets any more attention because it bit them one time, and they can't get past that. So the confidence that we have to have and the dedication that I think, like I said, it takes a special person to keep and raise reptiles, because there's just some things that you and I are going to go through that people that own cats and dogs are not going to go through.
Right.
And we have to push through it to get to the other side.
And
and as a breeder, and I'd hope the rest of the breeders would agree with this, that if you do have an animal that's particularly spicy or strikes or apprehensive when you go to take it out, you got to be honest with the customer. Mm-hmm. And if it costs you a sale, it costs you a sale. But some of these people that are getting it have 1, 2, maybe it's their second or third snake they're going to get. You have to let them know what they're going to expect out of the bag, literally out of the snake bag.
And that can be difficult for some breeders who have like a lot of clutches. They can't really like remember what certain personalities are some. I haven't had so many clutches where I don't tend to, I'm like, oh, I don't remember how they are. But I always remember the ones that are difficult, and I'll have them at a show, and people are like, oh, how about this one? And I'm like, nah, this guy's kind of a jerk. I'll say it like, this guy's kind of a jerk. This was okay. It helps to kind of know these things, but you have to tell people, but the other thing too is when they do pick up an animal from you, and let's say it was really handled well with you in your house, and then they go there and things are different. And I tell people they have to get used to so much. They have to get used to so much. They just went from being, if it was born here, now they were born here, they spend all their time here, they don't know anything else. Now they're at a show, now they leave the show, now they're in this container. They're put into an enclosure that they have to get used to the enclosure. They have to get used to the room that the enclosure is in. They have to get used to the home that the enclosure, all of these things. If you have kids running around, different, things people are cooking in the house could be different smells. You may have dogs. I don't like, there's all these things. And those first couple of days, they might be kind of cool and you can handle them. And then after a couple of days, they might kind of settle in and feel a little threatened or so. Or that first day, they might be all striking. And then after that second or third day, it never happens again. But it's like you said, you have to keep working with them. And it's not that a breeder lied, too. It's not like the breeder's like, oh, he's great. And then you're like, oh, you're lying. Just like anybody, any person put in a different situation, we are going to react differently. We have to acclimate. So they're doing the same thing. They don't know what's going on. They're just, I was here, now I'm here, now I'm here, now I'm here. everything is different.
And I think going back to what Gary said at the beginning that goes along with what you're saying, Angel, is being prepared for what you're getting, right? Like, do your research. Know that it's a commitment. Get yourself prepared. Ask lots of questions. Do your best by the animal before you even get it.
And there are some animals that you already know, like if you did a little research, you already know that there's a possibility that this animal may behave this way. You know, certain animals have some distinct qualities that they behave a certain way. And if you know this already, like ball pythons, you know that there's a good possibility they might not eat. You know that if it touches their nose, they're going to hide. You know that, like, all of these things, if you kind of prepare yourself a little bit before that, and you're like, okay, that's not so bad and that's okay, that's something I can deal with. But if it's something you're like, I cannot deal with this feeding inconsistency crap, I get that. I totally get that. But people, you know, having a large snake, retic, Burmese, and so on, even a common boa, it might feel like, oh, well, I know it gets big, but it'll be fine by that time. But if they're not working with the animal, and then the animal's growing, it's at the 4, 5, 6 foot, and now it's big and it's still not very handleable, that's a problem. You know, you had all this time to work with this animal, you know, and things happen. You know, life happens. You may have had the time, then life happened, and you just couldn't commit to the time. But the animal's not going to change unless you work with them. So having, you know, all that time that you're putting in with you know, with what you're saying with your story, working with these particular animals, getting them handleable. Some right out the box are great. Some need some time. Some need a lot of time. But you got to be able to do that. And again, if you have a snake that you know is going to be big, you got to put that time in and make sure. And it could be cool from the beginning, and you're good. That's fine. But still have the mentality, have the idea that, like, I got to get this animal cool beforehand, because by the time it is close to 10 foot, you know, I got to be able to be comfortable with this.
Yeah. I got a friend of mine that his name is Tim from Intrepid Exotics, and he's one of the greatest people that I know when it comes to this kind of a topic. And it's something that, as a member of the large constrictor community, we talk about is that it is so much easier to work with a smaller animal and grow with it than to adopt somebody's large animal and try to work with it. You know what I mean? Because your point is spot on, where you could let's say you get a 10-foot constrictor, right? And for 2 days, that animal is manageable. But then all of a sudden, something happens, and senses, smells, people, size of enclosure, different enclosure, whatever it is, now that animal is snapped. And you go to get it out the next time, and it's scared, it's defensive, and it doesn't want to be held. So it's just it's a gamble when you have something that is bigger than you are, it's stronger than you are, and definitely can put you in the hospital, right? When you have a baby reticulated python, and I say this like, know what you're getting yourself into. Because I've got reticulated pythons that are like 4 feet long right now, and they are the cutest little things in the world. But are they still cute when they're 10, 12 feet long and eating rabbits? You know, that's what kind of separates people from, oh, what a cute snake. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. And it's got such a great personality, but it's only 3 to 4 feet long and a baby, right? When you have to buy an 8-foot enclosure for it, when you have to buy all the heating and the substrate, and you have to clean up the human-sized poops that it leaves behind. I mean, there's just so many different variables that I can probably miss, right, in being a reticulated python keeper. But if you can get through all those different variables, at the end of the day, you've got yourself a wonderful animal. I was keeping just super dwarfs, right? And we went to a reptile show. Emma was about 8 feet long, I think, when we went to that show. And my wife is very curious about people and breeders. And don't be surprised if she asks you how you keep your animals, because she's an animal lover and she wants to know, right? She's going to put you all in check. But we were at the reptile show in Roseville, and I had the 8-foot retic out. I was in love with it, but it was a mainland. I didn't want a mainland reticulated python. My wife went up to the breeder and said, hey, what are you going to do with this animal if you don't sell it here? And he says, well, she goes back into a 3-foot bin until we go to the next show. And my wife just dropped. She said, what? And then she came to me and said, we're taking that animal home. And I was like, you realize what animal can get like 17 feet long? She goes, I don't care. You will take better care of it than he will. We're taking it home. So that's how I ended up with my first mainland. And so she was a larger mainland when I got her, but she's been the sweetest animal that I've ever had. And that is because I work with her constantly. But that also started this thing about, oh, you know what? I like mainlands now. I love the bigger constrictor. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 mainland reticulated pythons, and I've got a Burmese python. And all these animals are probably going to get between 14 and 17 feet long, at the end of the day. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you I'd be crazy. There's no way in the world I'd ever own a mainland reticulated python. Now I can't live without them. They're absolutely the best personal, interactive animals that I think I've ever handled before. And they take work. They're definitely not an animal that you just pick up and it's their plug and play, man. They're just really, they take work, they take dedication. And I tell you what, if you put all that work into them, they're going to give it back to you tenfold. That's just my experience with them.
Yeah, it's the thing. Experience and education changes a lot. Time, learning, all of that. It changes a lot. I wasn't into reptiles. I had nothing. Look at me now. I wanted nothing to do with them, and now I can't live without them.
So here's a question. Well, Kurt and Nikki, when you guys got married, you guys been together for how long?
Oh gosh,
Almost
we got
15 years,
we got married in 2010.
Okay, so who was the reptile person? You know what? Now that I'm even mentioning this, I think I heard the story before. I think, as a matter of fact, it was just, you were deathly afraid of snakes, right? But you went to a show and you got a snake somehow. You brought it home and convinced Kurt that it was time to get a ball python. Am I correct?
Kurt was the one. Kurt has a friend that had 1 or 2 ball pythons at the time, and he came home after going over to his house and he said, we have to get one of these things. Wait till you hold it and feel how soft they are and how amazing they are. And I said, over my dead body. You're not bringing one into the house. And it wasn't so much that I was afraid of them. I just was like, no way, we're not keeping snakes. And then we went and we got one. We got an Inchy Champagne Erebor who started it all. And after we brought him home, I was like, so we're going to need another one of these because I can't have just one of these things. I need another one. So it was Kurt.
Yeah.
Kurt did it.
It was a fabulous choice looking back.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely do it again.
Yep.
What about you, Angel? Are you married to a significant other? Or?
Yep, I'm married. My wife 100% supports me. She doesn't. She has nothing to do with it, but is my biggest enabler. There have been many purchases. I'm like, I don't know if I should. And she's like, just buy it. She goes, do you want it? I'm like, yeah, buy it. Like, way too many purchases like that. I'm the one that stops myself from buying. She's the one that's like, please get it because I know you want it. She has been my biggest supporter from day one.
Yeah. So my wife, when I moved in here, I moved in with my wife 20 years ago, and I moved in with 2 boa constrictors, and she's been my biggest supporter. She's never ever told me you've got too many reptiles. You don't need another reptile. Matter of fact, when people, usually I get contacted about bigger snakes, and people ask me, hey, is there a way that you can take this animal in? She's usually the first one that says, hey, do we have room for it? Can you make room for it? And she's been extremely supportive, but also she's a big lizard. She loves her lizards. She's got a tegu that we bought in Texas 2 years ago, and it's probably almost 4.5 feet long now, but we got it when it was this big, and that's pretty much her animal. And she's acquired her own reptiles over the years that, I mean, she takes care of. I don't have nothing to do with the lizards, except for my Ackies monitor. Now, my Ackies monitor, that's a different story. I have wanted a monitor for a very, very long time, and I just don't have the time, patience, or tolerance for an Asian water monitor. Although that's what I want, right? I want big, right? And I figured that, you know, if I'm going to do a monitor, I better keep it small. So I had a friend of mine.
Perfect. They're perfect. They are perfect. I love them so much.
Yeah, he's pacing around in his enclosure right now. I'm learning. It's definitely not like a retic, right? Retics, I can pick them up, I can take them out, and do anything I want with my retics. He's got a bit of an attitude. So he's got a time frame. Like, hey, in the morning, you're good. In the middle of the afternoon, don't touch me. In the evening, I'm good. So there's like times when I can get him out, and those are the times like I take advantage of that, where he's very comfortable in my hands. He's very comfortable with me touching him and getting that association of human to reptile. But like right now, he's like probably been under his heat lamp for probably, I don't know, a couple hours. So he's just like full of energy, up and down, everything in his enclosure. And that's when I don't want to get him out, because he flew off my head one day. He climbed on top of my head, and all of a sudden he took the leap of faith and jumped like 3 feet. And I just happened to see it go. And I caught him in midair. And I was like, holy moly, you know what I mean?
I
thought I lost him.
They're fast. I had 3 of them. They're fast.
Yeah. So, but you know, I've had this thing for about 2 months now, and we're still building a relationship. And I think monitors and lizards in general are way different. They're different when it comes to building relationships than they are with reticulated pythons. It's a little more difficult, a little more challenging. There's a lot more work that goes into it, and there's a lot more reading of the animal. You know, it's about knowing when it's okay and when it's not okay. You know. And we got to do the same thing with any reptile. You know, I think it's important that you understand and know your animal's behaviors. It's not about if you get bit, it's about when you get bit. But I guarantee this, right? If you've been bit by your animal, it's probably because you weren't reading the behavior of your animal. And, you know, I've been bit a couple of times, and it was my fault. I picked up, one of my retics was bucking. When I picked it up, and I said, screw it. And I picked her up anyways, and she turned around and tagged me for it. You know, she was telling me I don't want to be handled, and I neglected her signs. You know, so we have to read our animals' behaviors if we want to maintain like a safe environment.
The worst bites, well, all the bites pretty much, but the worst bites I ever got, 100% my fault. 100% my fault. I wouldn't blame, I can't. How can I blame them? You know, it's 100% my fault. I did something wrong. I wasn't reading. Whatever it was, I did something. You know, I can't blame the animal. I can't be upset with the animal. So that's something I think that's something you have to like really understand about yourself and say, look, okay, I messed up. What did I do wrong? I messed up. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things about seasoned reptile keepers is that you know your animals, you study their behaviors, and you know when's a good time and when's not a good time. I mean, I think all of us have that I really want to hold my animal instinct in them. So when you go into the enclosure, and I know 9 out of 10 times if something's wrong, my animal's going to let me know immediately. Like, first of all, let's say I got an animal in shed, right? Typically, my animals will go into their hides. I won't see them for 2 weeks. But what do? I go up and that side of the enclosure, I pull the hide off and go, hey, check me out. I want to pick you up, you know? Instead of going, you know what, the animal is down. It doesn't want to be interacted with right now. It can't see because its eyes are filled with fluid. But yet, here's this big happy human. Hey, I'm going to come and pick you up. And I get tagged because I didn't respect the boundaries of my animal. So is it my animal's fault for biting me, or is it my fault for going in there in the first place when I know that they didn't want to be messed with, you know? And I think that's where I mean, a lot of this I say for me, it's not for nobody else, right? It's for me, because I'm the one that has these animals that are big and they can leave nasty bites if you're not paying attention. So reading their behaviors is of the utmost importance. And it doesn't matter if it's a bearded dragon or if it's a reticulated python. If you're not reading your animal's behavior, something bad is going to happen.
And I don't think a lot of people realize how bad some of these bites can be. You know, some people are like, "Oh, it's okay if it bites me." It's like, I mean, depending on the snake, sure, but some of these animals it can be rough. I've personally seen some gnarly bite, like really bad, like go straight to the emergency room bites. But and again, it wasn't 9 times out of 10, it wasn't like negligence. It was just, sometimes things happen, but it is true. Sometimes these bites get really bad. They're really bad. So you got to pay attention. You just got to pay attention.
Especially feeding, I mean, feeding is another one. And it doesn't matter again, I use tongs. All right. I have tongs that are larger than, I've got like 5 foot long tongs because I don't want to be anywhere near the striking distance of these animals. I don't care. I see people hold rats by their tails and then stick their arm inside the enclosure and then wonder why they're reticulated python wrapped on their forearm. I mean, it's just stupid. I don't care. That is just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. If you don't want to get bit, you play it safe. And with me, I have very long tongs. I open up the enclosure where the animal is not, and I stick just the tongs in at the point where if that animal comes flying, it's not going to come flying out of the enclosure. These animals are food-driven animals, and ball pythons are the same way. You get a ball python that is in food response, don't be sticking it over with your fingers and the tail holding the rat over it. You're going to get bit, and it's not like
ball pythons. They're not the swift, like they're not perfect. Like ball pythons, they're not perfect.
I love my animals, man, but they look retarded sometimes when they come flying out trying to get their food. They go flying the other way. And the other thing is that they're so long. If they miss, they misdirect, and they just start flinging like this with their jaws wide open. So, I mean, I've had them lock onto my tongs before and had to close the enclosure and leave the tongs in there till they're done because I'm not going to try and pull it out. It's just the safest thing for me to do. But again, it's really about safety for me. I've got big animals. I take safety very, very seriously, whether it's one of my smaller retics or it's a bigger retic, because I don't want to let my guard down. I have never, ever, ever had a food response bite, and I don't plan on getting one. So the only way I know to do that is to play it safe.
Yeah, that's the worst bite I've ever gotten was a food response bite. And I was using tongs for that one, and it missed the rodent completely, came right up the tongs and nailed me. Just sliced my finger wide open. So yeah, it's no joke. I can't even imagine what an 8-foot-plus snake would do. It would be severe.
Because you think about it, they're in the room, the smell of the rodents. Even if you just brought live rodents into a room and you're going, let's say somebody, you were feeding live, and that rodent smells in the air. By the time you get 3-4 cages down, like they smell it, they know. Or if you're thawing the rats out in the room, and that smell is it's been in the room for however long it takes you to thaw. As soon as you start opening tubs or opening cages, they're ready. Any movement, they're hungry. They're hungry. They're gonna go for it. As nice and as sweet as your animal can be, that if they are hungry, they're gonna take a shot.
Yeah, they're predatory by nature. They are predatory by nature, and they are. It was just right there on the tip of my tongue. The opportunists. So they will take any opportunity they can if they think they're being fed. All it takes is for one animal in this room to be fed, and every one of them is on high alert. They all know, hey, wait a minute, somebody just got fed. I'm next. And you can see it. It's like, wait a minute, it's not even your turn to eat this week, But they know instinctively, as soon as one animal gets fed, it's like a bomb goes off in here, and they're like, oh, it's time,
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not their fault. It's not malice.
No,
There's
it's
no
not.
malice. They're hungry. It just happens.
It's
And you're
absolutely-
sweetest. And then what happens 2 days later? Just pick them up. They're fine. They don't care. And we still love them for it. You get nailed. They're like, all right. It was my fault. I shouldn't have. Whatever it was.
Right.
They're animals. They're animals. What are you gonna do? Still love them. Still gonna have them. Not getting rid of them.
Yep.
The beautiful thing about the retics is that if they're not being fed and they have that food response, it can be turned off. As soon as I rub my hook on them, they know, okay, not being fed, and then it gets turned off. But until you do that, I mean, it is a sight to see when you walk in here, especially with these bigger animals, because they're like at the glass going, all right, where's mine? Where's mine? You just see the behavior, It's like, calm down. Next week you get fed.
It's true. It's true. Well, Gary, it's about time for us to wrap it up here. We have had a great time. I think we definitely need to have you on again in the future.
Absolutely.
We're excited
Thank
to
you.
see you in Puyallup and really look forward to meeting you. But before we go, you want to tell people where they can find you, to follow you, and all that good stuff?
Well, you have to go up Highway 49 and then take a left on Mountain Ranch Road. If you follow me, I'm gonna take you into the foothills, and you're gonna go, where is he taking me? No, on my Instagram, it's Constricted and Addicted, and I'm also in a band. So if you're into metal, I also have a Instagram called Nevayan Guitars 2. Nevayan Guitars 2, I think it is, or 1. I'm one of the 2 guitar players in Nevayan. So Nevayan Guitars, you'll find me. And then on my Instagram, it's just, or my Facebook, it's just Gary Tarpley. And, I'm a social media freak. I love people. So as long as you're cool people, if you're like taking my pictures and creating fake profiles, I'm not going to like you so much, but at any rate, Constricted and Addicted on Instagram, Nevayan Guitars. I think it's Nevayan Guitars. Let me check. I'm going to give you some wrong information here.
While you're looking that up, we have to say thank you for being here in the circle. For sure.
Nevayan Guitars 1.
There we go.
If we can figure it out, we'll just put your information in the show notes.
Yes.
I don't know how to do that. Do I say join the chat?
Okay. It's okay. We'll do it for you.
We'll do
Yeah,
it.
perfect.
We'll just put the links there. Nikki's got it.
You don't have to worry about it at all. I'll get it. No, this was a blast. It was great listening to you and hearing, just being able to see your passion and hear your passion, Gary.
You guys too. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I don't get invited onto a whole lot of podcasts, which it's not like I'm signing applications for it, but when I do, I really truly appreciate the opportunity to come on and share my passion. I absolutely love this, and if I can share that with somebody else, it makes me feel good.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary. Aaron Bosa already beat us to it. He put your information in there so everybody can find you.
Thank you, buddy. I love you, man. Jen, thank you. Love you too. And everybody else who I've seen back and forth in the chat, I really, truly appreciate everybody's love and support.
And we all appreciate you, Gary. That is for
And
sure.
you guys,
That was
thank you
great.
so much.
It was great meeting
Thanks
you.
great to meet you too. And thanks for the follow, man. I appreciate it. And let's do this again some other time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And can't wait to meet you here in a month.
Yes, we'll be there.
All right. See you soon. And thanks again, everybody, for being
All right,
here.
guys.
Thank you, Gary.